gentle, eerie howling was in the air, which seemed to be permeated with haunting and lonely cries of souls that had existed or might never exist, or might be in some state of limbo in between. In the distance was the city. Its name was unknown and would forever remain so. There was a man in a greenish-yellow shirt whose mind was elsewhere and elsewhen. Behind him stood his friends, his crew. They waited patiently. Finally, he turned and addressed them. "Let's get the hell out of here." The words hung there for a moment, startling in their vehemence. The crew took several small steps closer to each other. It was partly a reflex to make sure they would be within range of the transporter effect. But there was something else this time. It was an unspoken desire to try to lend support by dint of the fact that they were there. They did not yet know the sacrifices their captain had made. Did not know that, in the best tradition of romance, he had found a part of his soul existing in a woman and had been drawn to her. And then he had lost that part, which he hadn't fully realized he was missing in the first place. There was a difference that the crew sensed this time in their captain. Many a time had he been battered, but as the old saying went, battered but unbowed. This time, though, he was bowed. They got the hell out of there, and Commodore Data watched them go. Across the compound, Mary Mac headed in the direction of Commodore Data. Mary Mac's skin was green, as was standard for an Orion woman. Her long, jet-black hair was delicately and elaborately braided. Most incredibly, she wore glasses. All of it was designed to try and downplay the widely held belief that all Orion women were nothing but animalistic sex kittens. Her look had gotten her quite far because people would always wait for her to revert to type. But she never did, for she had trained herself too long. As a result, she was always a bit of a surprise, and people loved surprises. Which was why Mary Mac had worked her way up through the ranks and eventually landed the assignment of project administrator on Forever World. The planet did not have an official name. Somehow it seemed presumptuous for any mere mortal to give it one, so it had simply been nicknamed Forever World, and that was what had stuck. The gravel crunched under her boots as she got to the other side of the compound. There were two constants on the Forever World. One was the steady, mournful sigh of the wind, and the other was the presence of the Guardian of Forever. At this particular moment, the legendary time portal had finished yet another run-through of a particular era. It was now silent, displaying nothing. A screen for slower, delayed showings was set up next to the Guardian. Playing out on that screen now was a scene very familiar to Mary Mac. Data stood there, his back to Mary Mac, hands draped just below the base of his spine. As Mary Mac stepped closer, she heard a familiar voice, a voice filled with resolve and yet hidden trauma. "Let's get the hell out of here." Mary Mac smiled and called out to Data.
"Well, that certainly figures."
Data turned and looked at her, his face calm and composed as always, his gold skin glittering in the half-light.
"I beg your pardon."
She pointed at the Guardian.
"That moment, it's one of the most popular. Everyone wants to see the moment when James Kirk came back through time, when he had to let Edith Keeler die so that time could be restored to its normal flow."
Commodore Data, the commander of the USS Enterprise, registry number 1701-F, stared at the Guardian for a long moment, then stepped back. Mary Mac watched Data walk away.
"We'd be honored, Commodore, if you'd join us for dinner up at the compound."
"Very well. First, I'll contact the Enterprise." Mary Mac looked skyward as if she could see the great starship.
"What's she like, Commodore? The Enterprise, I mean. You served on an earlier Enterprise, didn't you?"
"Yes, I did.
And in many ways, the Enterprise 1701F is similar to the 1701D from 45 years ago. But as fulfilling as my current command might be, I still dwell on those early days and my first companions. Some are dead, some are retired, some are still active. It's a large galaxy and not always easy to keep apprised. But there is one who got his current assignment 3 years ago and hasn't moved from that spot. That would, of course, be Admiral Riker. Starbase 86 was far removed from the more frequently traveled space lanes. Visitors were rare. The facilities were not top of the line, they were simply good enough. Once upon a time, the commanding officer of Starbase 86 lived by the axiom of good enough never is. But that was a lifetime ago, someone else's lifetime. Admiral Riker, commanding officer of Starbase 86, stared out the viewport of his office, watching the lights of stars that, because of the time it took for light to travel, might have already died years ago. He spoke out loud to himself. Sometimes, seeing isn't believing. Admiral? Admiral Riker, are you okay? Come in, Lieutenant Dexter. The lieutenant entered, looking apprehensive, as he always did. Did I catch you at a bad time, Admiral? Lieutenant, I have nothing but time. Dexter began to natter on about upcoming matters to be attended to. The surveying ship Chance would be coming in for minor repairs the next week. Starfleet was complaining about the speed, or lack thereof, of paperwork being processed. Riker's head settled into his wrinkled hands. His gray beard felt brittle against his palm. Is there anything else, Lieutenant? There's one other thing, Admiral. A communique for you from Betazed. It was of a personal nature, and I'd never dream... Riker cut him off with a curt gesture. Of course you'd dream, Dexter. You've got your skinny fingers in every pie in this part of the galaxy. It's from her, isn't it? Is she all right? No, sir. She's dying, sir. And she's calling for you. He saw Riker's expression, the face of someone who had spent half his life feeling haunted. Make the arrangements. On occasion, Riker had spoken of his past to Dexter, and the lieutenant knew how difficult this was going to be for the Admiral, so he tried to put as positive a light on it as possible. You know, Admiral, it's possible that she wants to settle loose ends, close accounts. It's possible, sir, that she wants to forgive you. Riker looked at him with grim amusement. Now, why should she want to do that, Lieutenant, when I haven't forgiven myself? The structures in which the scientists of the Forever World lived were, at best, functional. Data looked around the table that served as the communal eating place for the scientists. The 6 scientists grouped around the table ate quietly, with talk at a minimum. Data had brought down his science officer, Blair, to join them. Blair was a head taller than Data, and covered with thick brown fur. His jaw jutted out, and his eyes were so small that they were almost impossible to spot. Data glanced around the table, and then turned to Mary Mack. My records indicate there were 7 of you. There were. We had a recent defection, Marlock. He took off the other day. Haven't seen him since. To be honest, we lose people all the time. You have the constant wind, the solitude. And with the Guardian out there, you feel like you're staring into a mirror from hell. And it's only so long before you see something staring back at you. Blair looked at Mary Mack with curiosity. What precisely do you scientists do here? We make observations, Lieutenant Blair. on history, society. We draw conclusions not only about the past and the present, but also the future. Tell me, Commodore Data, what conclusions did you draw from your chat with the Guardian? It would seem to confirm, Miss Mack, on the face of it, that which we had always known, that time is fluid. There is, however, another interpretation. All times coexist, either as parallel universes or even alternative time tracks. Actually, Commodore, it's interesting that you should mention that. I have something to show you along those lines. One of the Guardian's playbacks has revealed an intriguing turn of events. I think you'll find it very interesting.
Riker stood outside the Troi family mansion on Betazed. Captain Wesley Crusher, commander of the USS Hood, had accompanied him. Despite all the years that had passed, every angle of the house, every aspect, had been forever etched into Riker's memory. Tall and graceful, it was constructed so that the upper stories seemed almost to touch the sky. They knocked at the door and waited silently. And now it opened to reveal the always imposing form of the manservant, Mr. Holm. And then, the towering Mr. Holm did something totally unexpected, something that to Riker's knowledge he had only done once before. He spoke. "She's waiting." Riker headed slowly up the long, winding steps. Part of him wanted to run from the house, but his mind ordered him, "Damn it, Riker, be a man, for crying out loud." He entered the bedroom from which the sound of slow, barely perceptible breathing emerged. Deanna Troi lay on the bed. Her skin was taut, her lips and hair the same parched white color. Her eyes were closed. Riker approached the bed and sat on the edge. Crusher and Mr. Holm kept a respectful distance. Riker was certain she didn't even know he was there. He leaned over to kiss her on the forehead.
Deanna, I'm sorry.
Suddenly, her withered claw-like hand shot upward and grabbed him by the throat. Riker gasped, the noise partly cut off by the hand that was closing on his vocal cords. Deanna's eyes were opened and blazing with pure, unbridled hatred. Her voice was cracked and aged, but filled with a vitality that would not be daunted by such trivialities as death. And when she spoke, it was as if she were spitting out a curse.
"It's your fault. You should have saved her. She asked you, she begged you. You were Imzadi, and you let her die. You let it happen, and I hope you burn in hell. It's your fault!"
Crusher tore Deanna's hands loose from Riker's throat and pulled the Admiral away. Riker was gagging, but through the pain and mortification, he still managed to gasp out a few words.
It wasn't. I did everything I could. You have to understand, it wasn't my fault, Deanna. It happened too fast.
But it was too late. Deanna's head had slumped back onto her pillow. Her eyes were still wide open, but there was no light in them. Her hand was still in its claw-like grip, frozen in its final gesture. Wesley Crusher reached over, passing his hand over her eyes, and closed them. Riker addressed her one last time.
It wasn't my fault. Deanna, I did everything I could.
But he didn't believe it any more than she had. The funeral had been surprisingly simple. Considering the larger-than-life manner in which Deanna had lived her life, Riker had somehow expected a death that was, well, larger than death. Long after the others had left, Riker was left standing there, staring at Waxana's body in its clear, sealed entombment. As he turned to head for the door, a sudden storm cut loose. Lightning ribboned across the sky, and rain began to fall in blinding cascades. He stepped back into the mausoleum, turned, and looked at Waxana.
You arranged this, didn't you? You're up there less than 12 hours, and already you're telling them how to run things.
Waxana made no reply. The thunder did it for her.
All right. I know what you want me to see.
He walked into the next room, and there she was. In her clear encasement, perfectly preserved, Deanna was even more beautiful than his memory of her. The black hair still thick and full, the perfect lips formed into a small, round O shape. But no amount of preservation could put the warmth back into the soft skin, breathe the life back into her, open the eyes and pull the soul back into place. She could not open that lovely mouth and say,
Will!
Riker jumped 3 feet in the air, letting out a yell of shock. He turned to face an equally startled Captain Wesley Crusher.
I'm sorry, Admiral. Did I startle you?
Wes, where in hell did you come from?
Out there. I beamed down after the funeral was over. I wanted to know if you're ready to leave.
Oh, I'm ready. But Waxana's will stipulated that I was to go through her memorabilia and catalog it. Ostensibly, I'm the best qualified, but actually, she wants me to relive it all. She wanted one last opportunity to put me through what she's put herself through all these years, and you know what? I owe it to her. I owe her something.
Crusher stared for a long moment at Deanna's unmoving body.
You know, Admiral, I have to admit, I had a kind of crush on her, but I was just a kid. I remember that blue-green outfit she wore sometimes. That was my favorite.
Yeah, it was mine too, Wes. Every so often, when I was feeling frivolous, I'd put it on. I'd romp around the holodeck.
Crusher stared in shock at Riker's deadpan expression.
I'm kidding, Wesley.
Oh, You gave me kind of a strange mental picture there for a second. How did it happen, Admiral? How did she die? Mom could never bring herself to talk to me about it. I was at the academy doing my extra year. I was too stunned even to cry when I heard the news. I just sat there in my quarters saying, why? Why?
Riker walked toward the door and stepped just outside, allowing the rain to spatter on his face. The thunder cracked once more.
I have no answers for you, Wesley. None. But if you want to know what happened, I'll tell you. You're entitled to that. God knows we all are.
As if it were an old-fashioned campfire or perhaps stories being traded in a haunted house, Admiral William Riker sat on the floor of the mausoleum and, holding nothing back, spoke to Wesley Crusher of those last days with Deanna Troi. It was 45 years earlier. The Enterprise NCC 1701D had been chosen to be the site of an important peace conference. After decades of warfare, the Sindarine, with their economy collapsing, had sued for peace. They had approached their nearest neighbors, the races that they had preyed on for so long, the Cordians, the Bifrexians, and the Lus, and requested the opening of peace talks. The Enterprise had already picked up representatives from those three races and was now en route to the home planet of the Sindarine, where their delegation would board and the peace talks would get underway. Captain Picard anticipated that Counselor Troi's contribution to the proceedings would be invaluable. Her empathic abilities would be able to determine whether or not the Sindarine were sincere in their bid for peace. The drawback for the counselor was that the Sindarine were not always easy to read. Their natural aggression could screen her empathic talents to some degree. But if she were with individual members of the Sindarine long enough, she could eventually punch through their resistance and get a very clear feeling for them. All of this was on Commander Riker's mind as he went to Deanna's quarters to consult with her on the upcoming peace conference. He walked up to the door of her quarters and rang the chime. At first, there was no response, and for some reason, he became worried.
Deanna, are you all right? It's Will.
The door slid open, and Deanna was standing there wrapped in a gold dressing gown that hung half off her bare shoulder. She appeared slightly out of breath.
Deanna, is everything okay? I wanted to talk to you about...
Then he saw him. A man, a member of the Lust delegation, seated on the bed. He was clearly naked, holding a pillow in his lap. Riker waited for the 16-ton weight that he was sure would momentarily land squarely on his head.
Oh, sorry. Deanna, you're busy.
I was, Commander. Will Riker, this is Dan Lendon, aide to the ambassador of the Lust. Dan is an old friend. Dan, this is Commander Riker.
I remember the commander. He welcomed us aboard. Yes, I did, although not as enthusiastically as Counselor Troi here apparently did. Well, I'll just be going. Good seeing you, Dan. I mean, not that I expected to see this much of you.
Riker backed out into the hallway and the door closed with a very decisive hiss. He leaned against the wall of the corridor.
Perfect. Just perfect.
Some hours later, when Deanna Troi finally found William Riker, he was camped out at his usual table in 10 forward. She dropped down into the chair opposite him and waited for him to speak.
I'm so sorry, Deanna. Walking in on someone when they're involved with someone can be very disconcerting. And it's even more disconcerting when that person is someone you have feelings for, feelings that you always think you've sorted out, but you never really have. You know, actually, I had this weird feeling of reverse deja vu, because if you remember, you didn't handle it particularly well on Betazed when...
She stopped him quickly with a wave of her hand.
Youth excuses a great deal, Commander.
But then she smiled, understandingly.
Will, we have a lot of history between us. A lot of good reasons why our relationship is where it is.
Right, Counselor.
And naturally, we're going to be involved with other people. You understand that intellectually, Will. But what about when you're put face to face with the reality of it? I guess, Deanna, it catches me a little off guard and makes me feel just a smidgen of jealousy. Oh, nothing significant, and I truly want you to be happy. You're entitled to every happiness life has to offer you. I guess my problem is that I'm only human. That's true, Commander. But I've tried never to hold that against you.
It was night. Riker lay on his back, staring up into the darkness of his quarters, reflecting on how the day had gone. The Sindarine delegation had been brought aboard. A tall, elegant-looking woman named Nitsi, and her aide, Asa, who was smaller, nastier-looking, and seemed to keep staring at Deanna from the corner of his eye. There had been a dinner reception that had a general level of quiet tension, but everyone had gotten through it without an incident. His hands were interlaced behind his head, the pillow soft under him. He had been that way for over an hour as sleep refused to come. Sorting out his feelings for Deanna was rapidly becoming something of a royal pain. Perhaps they'd been kidding themselves. Here he was, someone accustomed to command situations, and she was someone who was always in touch with her feelings. So naturally, they thought they could control their feelings and dictate their relationship. Turn their emotions on and off like an old-style light switch. But how realistic was that? He pictured her lying in her quarters, wrapped in Dan's arms. And then something made him sit bolt upright in bed. Someone was there, hiding in a corner, lurking in the darkness. Lights! Obediently, his quarters filled with light. There he saw nothing unusual. After a moment, he shut the lights off, lay back, and slowly drifted off to sleep. Imzadi! The word screamed in his head, and he snapped fully awake. Deanna's voice had screamed in his mind. Something utterly terrifying was happening to her. Riker to Counselor Troi. No response. He yanked on a robe as he contacted Dr. Crusher and ordered her to send a med unit to Deanna's quarters immediately. Then he raced to Deanna's quarters, entered, and was horrified by the sight that greeted his eyes. Deanna was lying on the floor, nude but wrapped in a sheet, convulsions shaking her. Dan was standing over her, looking confused and helpless. Riker dropped to her side. Her skin was dead white. Her hands were clammy as he held them. Riker to sickbay, where the hell's that med unit?
Shh, Deanna. Everything's gonna be okay. It's okay, Deanna.
Her eyes were clouding over. He didn't even think she could see him.
Imzadi, please, help me.
Riker took her in his arms and was out the door, heading toward sickbay. He encountered the med unit part way, Beverly Crusher guiding the anti-grav crash cart. He laid Deanna down on the cart and ran alongside it, her hand still gripping her robe as they ran towards sickbay.
Help me, please. So cold.
The fear that ran through Deanna leaped into Riker and clamped around his heart. He felt as if his world were disintegrating.
I'll help you. I promise, Imzadi, I'll do anything, everything.
She didn't hear him. Her breath rattled once more in her chest, and by the time she was rolled into sickbay mere moments later, she was gone. Thousands of light years away, Roxana Troi woke up, and she began screaming. She did not stop for 2 solid hours. She was never the same after that. Captain Wesley Crusher stood in the mausoleum and stared out at the rain, which had tapered off to a mere trickle.
And Mom never found the cause.
Admiral Riker shook his head.
Massive cardiovascular collapse. But there seemed no physiological reason for it. Deanna just died.
At that moment, Crusher received a call from the hood. As he spoke with his ship, Riker walked back into the room where Deanna's body lay in state and rested a hand on the covering.
I'm sorry, Imzadi. I tried.
There was, of course, no response. Many had been the time over the years when he'd called out that word in his mind, but never had a reply come. He heard Wesley's soft footfall behind him.
I have to go, Admiral. Sudden groundquake on Signia 3. If you'd like, I'll walk you back to the house. I'll be fine, Wes.
Impulsively, Riker embraced the younger officer, patting him on the back.
Good sailing, Captain Crusher.
And good luck in your future endeavors, Admiral Riker. I hope you find happiness and some peace. Crusher to Hood, one to Bima.
Wesley Crusher's body shimmered out, and Riker was alone. Betazed had an excellent museum of antiquities, and Deanna Troi's collection was going to be a considerable and valuable addition. Riker had spent hours going through it all, cataloging and marking it. He had even found the holy rings of Betazed, which, for no reason he could determine, had been stuck in Waxana's closet. Riker had informed the authorities that he would shortly be ready to leave. Already a ship had been dispatched that would pick him up. He had found it grimly amusing to learn that it would be the Enterprise commanded by Commodore Data. After spending all this time dwelling on the past, somehow it seemed only appropriate. Having gone through all the other rooms in the house, he now approached the one he least looked forward to, Deanna's. It was exactly what he had anticipated. Waxana had left everything just as it was, like a shrine. And in Deanna's closet, he found a box. He recognized everything in it. It had all been perfectly preserved, no matter how arcane or trivial. There was a piece of vine from the Jalara jungle. There was the headband she'd worn at Chandra's wedding. There was a small but sharp rock stained with blood. And then he found the poem he'd written decades earlier in youthful exuberance. He read it over.
This is terrible. I can't believe I wrote this.
He picked up the headband, fingering it.
And I can't believe you liked it. I can't believe you.
He was surprised to find that his face was wet. He wiped the tears with the headband, feeling the softness of it against his face. He had thought he'd finished with the grief, but he'd been wrong. He clutched the headband even tighter, the tears streaming down his face, and remembered back to a time when he had been a young lieutenant, junior grade, newly assigned to Betazed. A time when he had felt no pain. Mark Roper, the man who headed the Federation embassy on Betazed, was heavy-set, with graying hair and a thick red nose. He looked up impatiently at the young lieutenant standing in the doorway of his office. The lieutenant's name was William Riker. Mark Roper didn't know that, nor did he seem to care.
You say you're Lieutenant Riker? When was our appointment?
Appointment? No. Mr. Roper, I'm the new Starfleet liaison. Actually, I'm supposed to be the new first officer on the USS Hood, but she was damaged in combat before I got there, so I was assigned here while she's in dry dock for repairs. They didn't tell you I was coming.
You're Riker. William Riker? Of course, my boy. Please accept my apology. Sit. As you can see by my perpetually discombobulated state, the more help we have here, the better. So, what have they told you about this assignment?
Well, Betazed is a long-standing Federation ally and quite valued. I also understand there have been some recent difficulties with the Sindarine.
Quite correct, Lieutenant. There have been 3 attacks in as many months now. A squad of Starfleet security has been stationed here. As the ranking Starfleet officer, you'll be in charge. We'd like to see these raiders disposed of.
Anything else I should know, Mr. Roper?
Yes. Remember that on Betazed, everyone knows what's going through your mind. Be straightforward and honest with them, and they'll appreciate and respect you for it.
A young, cheery-eyed woman with straight black hair and a bit of the devil in her eye flounced into the office. Hello, Daddy.
Lieutenant, this is my daughter, Wendy. Wendy, this is William Riker.
She studied the young lieutenant for a moment. You're cute. I like your eyes.
Wendy, darling, was there something in particular you wanted to discuss?
Yes, I wanted to know, which do you think would be better to wear to the Zerk's wedding tonight? The blue dress with the ruffles or the green dress that's cut low? Roper looked at Riker with clear irritation.
Yet another of the social engagements this office is expected to participate in. Chandra Zerks of the third house of Betazed is getting married tonight. The Federation is to send a representative. Guess who? Except I have to meet with a caterer now at the same time to pull together a reception.
Mr. Roper, if it's too much of an inconvenience for you, I have a simple solution. I'll go instead.
Would you, Lieutenant? That'd be great, if Wendy doesn't mind.
Wendy looked Riker up and down appraisingly and smiled. That sounds great. I look forward to seeing the lieutenant there. It was a cool, crisp evening as Riker escorted Wendy Roper, who had decided on the low-cut green dress, to the Betazoid wedding. Riker and Wendy entered the chapel, which was fairly plain, although inscriptions written in Betazoid lined parts of the wall. There were also recesses along the side, and clothes hangers dangled from them. Riker wondered what they were for. A thin but pleasant-looking Betazoid man approached them.
Welcome. I'm Gart Zerks, the father of the bride. They should be ready to start in just a moment. Chandra's quite nervous. She wants everything about her appearance to be perfect.
Riker nodded understandingly.
I know how it is. Bride wants to make sure the dress looks just right.
The edges of Zerx's mouth turned upward slightly.
You don't know, do you? Know what?
At that moment, the doors to the inner chapel opened. It was dazzling, filled with flowers, exotic and tropical. To the side was a small waterfall. Riker turned back to Gart Zerks to compliment him on the arrangement, and was astounded to see that Zerks had removed his shirt. Confused, he turned to Wendy to see her reaction. What he saw was Wendy stepping out of her dress. She looked up at him with innocent eyes. "What are you waiting for, Will? Musical accompaniment?" And now Riker saw to his shock that all the guests were stripping off their clothes and placing them on the hangers provided.
Is this standard? Yes, Lieutenant. At a Betazoid wedding, the bride, groom, wedding party, and guests all attend nude to symbolize that physically and spiritually there is nothing to hide.
Riker had a feeling that all the blood had drained from his face. Gart tried not to look as amused as he felt.
Lieutenant, if you don't go naked, I assure you, no one will think less of you. Attend the wedding in whatever manner you feel the most comfortable.
He walked away. Wendy looked at Riker chidingly.
Oh, Will, come on. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Do you?
No.
I mean, no. It's not dignified. Well, if you don't want to strip, then fine. At least come on in.
Wendy guided him to an aisle seat about halfway down. He looked around, naked people all around him, all of them looking far more relaxed than he was. He felt as if he were attracting more attention by being clothed.
Excuse me, Wendy. Be right back.
A few minutes later, he returned. Wendy looked up and grinned.
So, Will, I see you decided to join the party after all.
Riker sat down next to her, not precisely sure how to place his bare legs. He was grateful that the seats were cushioned, since cold metal would not have been appreciated right then. Wendy leaned over.
You were right, by the way. You have nothing to be ashamed of.
Then she coyly fingered a strand of his chest hair. Riker crossed his legs. At that moment, the ceremony started. The wedding parties entered, and yes, they were naked as well. First the groom, with his father and mother. Then Gart Zerks walked in, with the mother of the bride by his side. And then the bride. She She was gorgeous. Her eyes were the most luminous that Riker had ever seen. She held her pointed chin in an almost aristocratic manner, and her dark hair hung in thick ringlets around her head. Her neck was slender, and her figure, well, as they say in old detective novels, her body had the kind of curves that if you were a car, made you want to hug the road. What a crying shame. She was the bride already spoken for. But then she stepped aside and gestured to a young woman seated in the first row. I summon you to the place of marriage. At the command, the young woman rose from the audience. She had blonde hair tied back in a white headband. She stepped up to the groom, and they took each other's hands and faced the clergy. That was when Riker realized that the brunette wasn't the bride. She was some sort of equivalent of the maid of honor. Unbidden, uncensored thoughts about getting to know the maid of honor on a variety of levels stampeded through his mind. His eyes drank her in as she stood with her back to him. The lines of her hips, the arch of her spine, the richness of her smile. Her back was to him, but he could see her smile. Because she turned her head and was looking at him, right at him, and smiling. And with horror, he realized, oh my God, she knows what I'm thinking. She knows what I'd... She was still smiling at him. Her bosom shook slightly in silent laughter. And then, mercifully, she turned her attention back to the ceremony. Riker didn't hear a word of the rest of the proceedings. He had his own proceedings in mind. A reception had been arranged out in a garden behind the chapel. The guests were now all clothed, to Riker's relief. He kept scanning the crowd for some sign of the maid of honor. There was something about her, almost as if he knew her from somewhere. A burst of applause brought his attention back into focus, and there she was, having emerged with the bride and groom. In a ceremony that was very similar to the Earth tradition of throwing the bouquet, all the unmarried young women lined up as Chandra, the bride, removed her white headband. She tossed it over her shoulder. There was a burst of applause as the maid of honor came up with a triumphant. Wendy clapped her hands. Oh, how nice. Deanna caught it. She and Chandra have been friends for years. Riker tried to sound casual.
Deanna? Deanna who? Deanna Troi. She and Chandra go to the university together. Deanna's a psychology major, I think. How interesting. And what does catching the white cloth signify? That she's next to get married? No. What it means is that the great love of her life is at this gathering. I see. How romantic.
Several days after the wedding, Deanna Troi was walking across campus, lost in thought, when a voice called out from behind her.
Hey, hello. I remember you from the wedding.
Deanna stopped in her tracks. She couldn't place the voice, but the sense of the person was damned familiar. Then she smiled inwardly and thought,
I should have expected this.
The young man walked up to her, sticking out a hand.
We didn't get introduced. I'm Lieutenant William T. Riker.
What does the T stand for?
Terrific.
He waggled his eyebrows slightly to put across that he was making a joke just in case she didn't get it. She got it. But her expression made it clear that she didn't care for it.
I'm new here, and I'm just trying to get to know as many of the residents as I can. I see. So you're going around and introducing yourself one person at a time. That could take quite a while. It'll take even longer when the people I'm introducing myself to don't even tell me their names.
She took his hand and shook it firmly.
I am Deanna Troi, and the answer is no. The answer to what? To just about any question you'd care to pose. Look, Lieutenant, we both know you saw me at the wedding. We both know what was going through your mind. And I'm very flattered. Your reaction, however, would indicate an obsession for surface attributes only. To be blunt, Lieutenant, I sense you're someone who thrives on quick encounters, who enjoys the physical side of relationships but shies away from the deeper emotional attachments.
Riker stood his ground.
Call me Will. For the moment, I believe I prefer Lieutenant. For the moment? Does that mean you anticipate opportunities in the future to address me? Right now, Lieutenant, I'd like to address you to Vulcan and send you out with the next batch of communiques. Oh, how you sting, Miss Troi. To be at the receiving end of your rapier wit. Lieutenant, what will it take to get through to you that I am not interested? Go out with me, Miss Troi. Go out with you. You feel the best way to discourage you is to encourage you? What I feel is that it gives you a chance to make a decision based on something other than first impressions. If we spend time together and you decide you're not interested, then I'll accept that. I don't go where I'm not wanted. She couldn't resist the opening. You must not get around much then, Lieutenant.
His eyes narrowed and then, slowly, he nodded.
Fine. Have it your way.
He started to turn away from her. Then, to his surprise, she placed a hand lightly on his arm.
Pick me up the day after tomorrow at my home, around midday. We'll go on a picnic. I'll pack it. I look forward to it, Miss Troi.
She regarded him.
Tell me, Lieutenant, there's any number of women around. Why so interested in me? Because I like a challenge? Well, that's splendid. When you come over, I'm sure you'll hit it right off with my mother. She likes challenges too, and I have a feeling she's just going to adore you.
Riker stood outside the mansion that was the home of Deanna Troi and hesitated a moment before rapping on the door. Although he heard no footsteps, the door started to open slowly. Riker looked up and up. A towering man loomed over him.
I'm Lieutenant Riker. I'm here to pick up Deanna Troi. This is the Troi residence, isn't it?
The giant nodded, stepped back, providing a space for Riker to enter. He studied the looming figure, utterly perplexed. A voice came from behind the giant.
I see you've met Mr. Halm.
Riker saw an attractive woman with long, dark brown hair and a very aristocratic bearing sweeping towards him.
And you're Mrs. Halm?
Oh, no. I'm Deanna's mother.
Ah, Lieutenant William Riker, ma'am. But please, feel free to call me Will, or William, whichever you prefer. And I should call you?
You can call me Mrs. Troi.
Oh, well, Mrs. Troi, Deanna and I have an appointment.
Yes, I know she'll be right down, but I thought it would be nice if we had a few minutes to chat.
Riker sat down on a couch, sinking unexpectedly into the cushions. Luoxana took a seat nearby that bore a striking resemblance to a throne.
Now, Lieutenant, tell me all about yourself.
Mrs. Troi, why don't you tell me about myself?
All right, Lieutenant. You're aggressive, hard-working, dedicated, cautious, and you are extremely attracted to my daughter and have had a variety of sexual fantasies about her, some of which you're hoping to capitalize on today. Your preferred position for intercourse is
Mrs. Troi.
And what's this about lime-flavored oil rubs?
Mrs. Troi, I must admit, I'm shocked.
You're shocked? Lieutenant, they're your thoughts.
That may be, but it was my understanding that Betazoids prided themselves on courtesy. Your treatment of me here is not particularly courteous. You're right. Where in the world are my manners? I haven't offered you anything to drink. Mr. Hom! That's not what I'm referring to. You're speaking like I'm the enemy. Oh, no, Lieutenant. I think of you as an experience, one that Deanna will encounter, learn from, and grow from. You have to understand, Lieutenant, my daughter is an attentive, intelligent young lady who will inherit from me tremendous responsibilities. There are certain dictates upon her that come with who she is. She accepts and welcomes that. I want you to be considerate of those dictates, and I want you to do nothing that will interfere with her destiny or sense of purpose. Nothing, meaning? Nothing, Lieutenant, meaning nothing!
Deanna chose that moment to make her appearance. Riker felt a flash of disappointment. Her long, thick hair was tied up in a small, tight knot. The lines of her shapely figure were hidden under a loose-fitting caftan-like outfit. In front of her, she held a small basket. "Hello, Will?" Riker got to his feet.
Deanna, how lovely you look.
But Lwaxana interrupted.
Aside from the fact that he hates the dress and the way you're wearing your hair.
Riker fired Lwaxana an angry glance. Deanna was also looking at Lwaxana. "Mother, you suggested the hairstyle and the dress."
Why, so I did. Not too fond of my taste, Lieutenant?
It wouldn't matter if she shaved her head and wore sackcloth and ashes. Deanna would still look lovely.
Mother and daughter exchanged a glance, and Lwaxana looked back at Riker.
Very smooth, Lieutenant.
Thank you.
He went to Deanna and gestured toward the front door. She smiled at her mother as they went out. Lwaxana did not smile back. Deanna and Riker were seated up on a grassy knoll overlooking a particularly lovely stretch of Betazed countryside. The contents of the picnic basket were scattered about the ground around them.
I hope she wasn't too hard on you, Lieutenant. Oh, nothing I couldn't handle. What are you grinning about, Deanna? What's so funny? Well, it's the way you responded. I asked a question about how something made you feel, and you responded that the situation was within your control. Not everything has to be defined in terms of whether you can handle it or not. Or is control so important for you, Lieutenant? Not letting things get out of control is very important. You can't stay in command that way. Do you think of everything in terms of Starfleet? Not everything.
He reached across, grabbed her by the arm, and pulled her to him. For a moment, he felt her body go limp against him, and he kissed her. He felt something electric pass between them, and then he felt her knee in the pit of his stomach. He gasped, clutching his belly and moaning softly. Deanna smoothed out her dress, and looking utterly composed, reached into the basket and pulled out a brown pastry.
Some dessert, Lieutenant.
Deanna, you didn't have to do that. You could simply have said no.
I did. I distinctly remember.
You didn't. If you'd have said no, I'd have stopped.
I was sure that I...
You know what, Deanna? You may have thought you did, but you didn't. For a moment there, you allowed yourself to want me. You don't know your own mind, much less mine. Is that a fact? Yes. Well, then just answer me this. Do you want the dessert or not?
He shook his head in confusion.
That's the question?
Even she looked puzzled by it.
Yes.
No dessert, thanks. Between the meal and your knee, my stomach's pretty much finished for the afternoon. So tell me, once you've got your psychology degree, what are you going to do with it?
I don't know. Probably nothing. Nothing? But what about a career? My life is my career. My responsibilities are part of Betazed tradition. I'm not like you, Will. Many aspects of my life are already set. You know, Deanna, I've already had this conversation with your mother. It's a shame you haven't got a mind of your own. Deanna began shoving all the picnic materials back into the basket. This was stupid. I don't know why I let myself be talked into this. You know what your problem is, Deanna? You're so damned used to studying feelings and thinking about feelings and contemplating feelings that you have no idea of how to just go with feelings. I bet you don't have a romantic bone in your body. The idea of love at first sight would be alien to you. If you ever met your soulmate, you'd probably intellectualize your feelings to death. You'd never follow your impulse. My attitude is different from yours, Will. You always follow your impulses, and they're good ones by and large, I'm sure. You're very confident, and that's a requirement for your career, but it's not the sort of mindset I'm used to. I doubt there's any sort of future for us. He slid closer to her. Then change me, Deanna. You're studying to be a psychologist, to help people. If you think I have emotional shortcomings, then do something about it. I'm perfectly willing to be a guinea pig. She stared at him a moment. You're just hoping this will afford you an opportunity down the road to make love to me. That's right, Deanna, and you're hoping it will too. Secretly, you're grateful for the chance to bring me up to your level so that you can feel better about coming down to mine. He looked at her with such challenge in his eyes that she took his hand and shook it firmly. It's a deal. Prepare to be a guinea pig, Lieutenant Riker. Miss Troi, point me to the maze. Several days later, Deanna was guiding Riker through the Betazed Museum of Art. Soul music, as Deanna called it, floated through the air. Deanna led Riker through a room lined with abstract paintings. They stopped in front of one that was concentric splashes of red, blue, green, white, black, and a couple of other colors that Riker didn't recognize. Deanna indicated the painting reverently. I come here once a week, every week, and study this painting. I always see new things in it. Now, tell me what you see. Look, maybe we can start with another painting, something that looks like something. Will, you're not even trying. You said you were going to cooperate. He looked at the painting in exasperation. It looked like a jumble of paints. Then he felt two strong fingers at the base of his skull squeezing together and massaging him. Deanna's arm moved in a steady, circular motion. He started to feel tension that he didn't even know he had ebb from him. She spoke in his ear. Now, while you're relaxing, tell me what you see. I see paint swirls, big, goopy paint swirls. She stopped massaging him and stared at him. Goopy? This is a word? Goopy? I'm sorry, I don't have much taste for abstract art. When I look at something, I want it to look like something. Come on, Lieutenant. We're getting out of here. Where are we going? Back to basics. The tree towered over them, its trunk brown and gnarled. There were no leaves on it, and its branches seemed to stretch up forever. Deanna climbed it with ease, and Riker quickly followed. At least this was mildly entertaining for him, particularly because he liked the play of Deanna's muscles under her tight clothes. She stopped at a point about 10 feet above the ground. Large branches
stuck out in either direction. She sidled out onto one and indicated that Riker should climb out onto the other.
Your problem, Lieutenant, is that the demands of your body have too much sway on your mind. Higher emotions are what separate us from the lower orders of life. Higher emotions and table manners. Let me guess. You're going to show me how to separate the needs of my mind from the needs of my body. That's right. Now, I want you to get a solid grip on the branch, just like I'm doing. Then we're going to drop off from the branch and hang on for as long as possible.
Riker smirked confidently.
Well, I'm obviously stronger than you, Deanna, so if this is some sort of competition, it has nothing to do with muscular strength, Will. Muscles have their limits, but the properly trained mind has none. Ready? And go.
They both dropped off the branch and hung there.
Sooner or later, your fingers will want to release. Your instinct will be to fight this impulse. Do not fight it. Just ignore it. Focus on something else. Anything else.
Riker tried to clear his mind and think about something else. What he wound up thinking about was Deanna, as he had seen her at the wedding, naked and smiling. He imagined her coming towards him, her arms outstretched, which reminded him of his arms, which were really starting to ache. He had no idea how long he'd been hanging there, but he thought he'd lost all feeling above the elbows. With a low, muttered curse, he dropped from the branch and landed with a hard thud. Deanna continued to hang there, her eyes closed, her breathing regular. Eventually, she opened her eyes and looked at him.
What's the matter, Will? The weight of all those muscles drag you down?
Deanna clambered upward, standing on the branch as if she were a tightrope walker.
You want to be the big, strong hero type, Will, who thinks he can just whisk the damsel out of danger in his mighty arms. But that attitude doesn't interest me.
Her foot slipped, and with a startled shriek, Deanna tumbled off. Riker moved like lightning and caught Deanna before she hit. He dropped to his knees, the shock rattling his teeth. But he still held on to her.
You okay? I'm fine. You can put me down.
Their faces had been mere inches from each other, and Riker now seized the initiative. He kissed her full on the lips. She just seemed to melt against him, and reflexively, her hands squeezed his shoulder blades as if afraid he might vanish, or the moment might end. Then she broke contact and squirmed out of his arms. She tried to pull herself together, but she was obviously still confused over everything that was going through her mind. Quickly, she turned and started to walk off. And Riker cleared his mind and thought of nothing else except what he wanted to do, right at this moment. And then he cut loose in an undisciplined, inelegant burst of thought. You're afraid of me. The reward to his Herculean effort was immediate. Deanna was thrown off step, and her head snapped around in astonishment. She looked right at him, utter shock on her face. To her credit, she recovered immediately, but Riker knew he'd gotten through to her.
Hey, Deanna. When's our next lesson?
Deanna just kept walking. That night, Riker lay in his quarters reading a primer on Betazed philosophy. He wasn't able to make heads or tails of it.
A friend tells you that she's very upset. Her immediate supervisor has said several overly critical things in regards to her work, and she feels frustrated and hurt over the situation. How do you respond?
Will thought about it a moment.
Well, I tell her that either she can improve her work habits, or she can tell the supervisor that the criticism is unwarranted. If he continues to be overly critical and she believes it to have no basis in fact, she can file a grievance up the chain of command.
He looked back at the book and read.
Tell your friend that you understand her frustration and that she's not alone, and she can count on you for emotional support.
Will shook his head.
But what's that going to solve? That won't address the problem of what she's going to do about the situation. This is ridiculous.
Suddenly there came an insistent rapping at his door. It opened, and standing there, her eyes bright, was Deanna.
I am not afraid of you. On what grounds do you say that? On the grounds that every time you're close to me, you start to lose control. Your body sends you signals that your brain doesn't want to accept.
Her gaze was steady and unrelenting.
All right, Lieutenant, come with me. We'll see just who has problems with getting close.
It was a fairly warm night. When Deanna stood, she was framed in the moonlight reflecting off a large lake, providing some degree of illumination. Her arms were crossed as if she were cold. Riker stood behind her.
It's nice out here, Deanna. Pretty remote. That's deliberate. All right, Will. Take your clothes off. I beg your pardon? It's a therapy technique I learned in class a couple of days ago. Take your clothes off. All of them. Okay, what's the joke? One of your girlfriends hiding in the woods, I get naked, you guys grab my clothes and run off, big laugh on the human, right?
Deanna gave a loud sigh and reached around to the back of her tunic. Within seconds, she stood naked in front of Riker and tossed her outfit to him. It landed in a small bundle at his feet.
Take your clothes off, Lieutenant.
He did so. They stood nude in the moonlight, and then she walked towards him and gestured that he should lie down.
On your side, your back towards me.
He rolled over, tucking his legs up a bit, looking slightly fetal and feeling slightly foolish. He heard motion behind him, and then Deanna was lying next to him. She curled up against him in the manner that humans still called spoons, for the way that spoons fit together when stacked. She slid one arm up under him and brought the other over, wrapping herself around him. She felt incredibly warm against him. He thought he was going to explode.
Now, Will, we're going to talk.
His voice was strangled.
Talk. Yes. You have to be able to deal with me without thinking about me on a physical level. And this is supposed to help? That's right. You are going to become comfortable with the notion of my sexuality and yours. And then we can move beyond it to more spiritual matters. Deanna, why in hell are you doing this? I mean, obviously it has no effect on you, but it's making me crazy.
One of her hands moved across his chest, and she sounded somewhat frustrated.
It's having an effect on me, the same as it's having on you. Don't you see? First and foremost, two people have to connect on an intellectual and spiritual level. I don't want to give in to the impulses I'm feeling. It would undercut everything that I believe in.
He began to realize how upset she was. He held her arms tightly against him.
Shh. It's okay. I understand. Really.
They were silent for a long time after that. He still felt the heat from her and the slow in and out of her breathing. But it wasn't affecting him quite the same way.
Okay, I've got something to talk about. This Betazed philosophy stuff. The example with the woman being criticized by her supervisor. Let me guess. You came up with ways to solve her problem and the text told you this was the wrong approach. The problem, Will, is that you were being insensitive to her desires. Insensitive how? I listened to her difficulties and I tried to make her life better, to solve her problem. Will, she wasn't looking for you to solve her problem. What the woman, let's call her Jane, what Jane was looking to you for was an augmentation of her emotional strength. She needed you to say that you were sympathetic to her difficulties and were supportive of her. This is the philosophy of Rabim, which simply translated means, I understand. It was Jane's job to solve the problem or not solve it as she saw fit. She just needed you to let her know that she was not alone. I'm still not sure I get it. Oh, you're starting to. You just haven't admitted to it. I know it's difficult for you, Will. Your impulse is to take command, but command isn't everything. It is to me. It's all I want to do. I want to beat Kirk's record. Who? James Kirk, youngest starship commander in fleet history. That's my goal, to have my own command. Who knows, Will? Someday you might find yourself in a situation where you discover that you enjoy following someone more than you would commanding. Never happen. No matter how much I liked the ship or crew, if I was then offered my own command, I'd be out of there in a heartbeat. You probably wouldn't understand. You're wrong, Will. I do understand. I may not agree, but I understand. So tell me other things about Betazoid philosophy that puzzle you. They remained that way, naked, wrapped around each other, just talking, until the first rays of sunlight stole across the treetops. It had been several days since Riker had seen Deanna. He was having a casual breakfast in a cafe. Seated next to him was Gart Zerks, the father of the bride whose wedding he'd attended the first night on Betazed. So, Lieutenant, I understand you're seeing Chandra's friend Deanna socially. I've overheard them chatting about it at the university. What were you doing at the university, sir? I'm a professor of psychology there. I even have Deanna in one of my classes. Riker chewed on a fork full of food. Is it the class where they teach nude therapy? Zerks looked at him incredulously. I beg your pardon. Riker began to suspect something. Well, I'd heard that there was this technique where a patient and his or her therapist take off their clothes and lie next to each other, even pressing up against each other. Lieutenant, I'd think that would probably lead to sex. Not necessarily, but why am I explaining this to you? I mean, certainly you know about... Lieutenant, I've never heard of any such technique. I would see little purpose for that sort of contact beyond the obvious gratification. Lieutenant, why are you grinning? Is there something you'd care to discuss with me? No. Nothing at all. I just find the entire thing funny. Oh, excuse me a moment. Riker here.
Lieutenant, this is Sergeant Tang, security. We have a situation on our hands. Sindarine raiders. A ship containing about 10 of them has landed atop the Betazed Art Museum.
Any hostages, Sergeant?
Yes, sir. We believe about 30 Betazoids remain in the museum.
Scramble the squad. I'll be right there. Within minutes, Riker was standing outside the art museum, where the crowd was milling about in confusion and concern. The
The Sindarine ship sat atop the museum like a giant spider. While Sergeant Tang had snipers stationed at key points, Riker worked with the squad's communications expert to tap into the Sindarine communications. Within moments, they were listening in as the Sindarine pilot, who had remained with the ship, apprised the raiders inside the museum of what was happening. Riker broke into the middle of their conversation. Attention, Sindarine raiders. You are completely surrounded and cannot escape. Surrender is your only alternative.
Who is this?
Lieutenant Riker of Starfleet. Who is this?
Maror of Sindarine. Keep your people away from my men, Federation man.
Maror, you cannot escape. If you surrender now, your cooperation will be noted.
How nice. That will make a lovely tombstone. Here lies Maror. He cooperated. No thank you, Lieutenant. And if you try and impede our departure, then you can explain the 36 Betazoid corpses to your superiors. Do we understand each other, Lieutenant?
He broke off the communication. Tang turned to Riker.
Do we simply let them get away?
No, Sergeant, we don't. We try to avoid injuring civilians. But the bottom line is that if they escape, we simply invite them to continue their activities at the expense and lives of other innocent people. It has to stop, here and now. Then they waited. They knew that the Sindarine ship was small. With the crew they already had, plus whatever loot they were taking from the art museum, they wouldn't have much room for hostages. Perhaps one at the most. And to get to their ship, they'd have to come out onto the roof. So all Riker and the security men had to do was wait until the right moment presented itself. The problem was that Sindarine were extremely resistant to phaser blasts. Settings that could stun Sindarine could injure, even kill other humanoids. So the marksmen would have to aim carefully to avoid hitting any prisoners the Sindarine might have with them. If the Sindarine did manage to make it to their ship, Sergeant Tang was prepared. He had with him the formidable Level 10 shoulder-mounted phaser cannon, Model 2. He claimed that on full power, it could knock a Betazed moon out of orbit. From the size of it, Riker had no reason to doubt it. Suddenly, Sergeant Tang jumped to attention.
They're coming out, sir.
One by one, the Sindarine appeared on the rooftop, heading for their ship and safety. They were carrying crates, no doubt filled with priceless Betazoid art. Riker was waiting until all 9 were visible before he ordered his men to open fire. And then the final member of the raiding team appeared. He was cradling a blaster in his right hand. His left arm was curled around the throat of a woman. A horrified Riker recognized her instantly. Oh, no. No, not Deanna. Riker knew what he had to do. The vast majority of the hostages were in the clear. Only one was left. One who might still survive if it all fell right. But if they made no move, then the raiders would escape, and more people would pay down the line. But Deanna's life was on the line. At that moment, Deanna was swung directly into Riker's sightline, and she looked straight at him, straight and proud and unafraid. 2 words rang in his head. I understand. Riker gave the order. Take them. From all around, phasers blasted outward, enveloping the Sindarine in coronas of energy. Several staggered and went down. 2 managed to withstand the barrage and make it to the ship, and one of them was the Sindarine who was dragging Deanna. He reached the ship and shoved Deanna inside ahead of him. The hatch rampway closed. With a roar of impulse engines, the ship lifted into the air. The hard-bitten Sergeant Tang had swung the phaser cannon onto his shoulder and activated it.
I can blow them out of the sky, Lieutenant. Quick and fast.
Could you cripple them, Sergeant?
It's trickier. And there's no guarantee the woman will survive the crash. You may not be doing her any favors.
I know. Cripple them. Tang made an adjustment and fired. The power of the phaser blast was beyond anything Riker had ever experienced directly. The air crackled around him. The blast took out the starboard engine and navigational instrumentation of the ship. It lurched wildly, tried to regain control, and failed. It spiraled downward, leaving a trail of thick black smoke behind it, miles long. Riker watched it go with a feeling of dread. Sergeant, in your estimation, where's it going to come down?
Judging from the speed and trajectory, Lieutenant, somewhere in the Jalara jungle. You know, Lieutenant, if she makes it through the crash, she has a good chance. The jungle has its dangers, mud pits and such, but there are a few really dangerous animals to contend with.
You're forgetting the most dangerous animals, Sergeant. They're the ones steering the ship. Maror didn't know what he was running from or running to, but there was one thing that he was certain of. He was going to kill that damn Betazoid woman before this jungle adventure was over. She sat on a rock nearby, and to his frustration, she looked exactly as she had the day before, and the day before that. Even though her clothes were ripped and dirty, her face filthy, her hair hanging in stringy ringlets that had lost all their bounce in the moisture of the jungle. Even with her shoes gone, her prospects slim, still she had her composure. Maror sneered at her.
Are you wondering why I haven't killed you yet?
You hope that I will serve some purpose in the near future.
Her calm was infuriating. He walked over to her and yanked her rudely to her feet.
I still can't believe that you survived the crash when others of my men didn't.
I was not tense. I had relaxed myself. Your men were tense. The stiffness resulted in the internal injuries that killed them.
Thank you for your diagnosis.
He led her through the jungle, watching carefully all about him for any sign of pursuit. Eventually, the vegetation around them thinned out. Ahead of them was a cleared area, a watering hole. He turned to her.
You first. If it doesn't make you sick, then I'll drink some.
She knelt down in front of the water, cupped her hands, and brought it to her lips. She sipped gingerly.
You realize, Maror, that you have nowhere to run to. You're just marking time.
I've never been caught. I take tremendous pride in that. Besides, maybe they'll eventually conclude we fell into one of those, what do you call them? Mud pits.
You sound very confident. A few days ago, I wouldn't have been able to tell otherwise. But from the time I've spent with you, I can tell you're afraid. Terrified of captivity. It's not pride. It's fear of being caught.
That's enough water for you. Move. My turn. You know, I was just tired of you before, but now I'm really, really sick of you. Your use as a hostage is being outweighed by the fact that I really just want to kill you and get you out of my... What the... Oh!
Deanna, having seized the opportunity to shove him into the water, now turned and ran like hell. As she dashed pell-mell through the jungle, she heard him crash behind her. She had seized the moment to try and escape because her empathy had convinced her that Maror was quite serious. He was about to kill her. She might not have any future opportunities to escape. She dodged to the right and stumbled on an outstretched root. She fell. Her right hand closed on a small pointed rock. She scrambled to her feet and kept going. A blaster roared behind her and she could feel the heat. For one insane moment, she envisioned Will Riker coming to her rescue. She had been such an idiot to waste the time that she had with him. Her own fears had held her back. And now she would never have the opportunity to act on the impulses that she had denied. Abruptly, the ground in front of her angled sharply upward. Just as she started to climb up the slope, A hand wrapped around her foot.
Got you betazoid bitch!
She tried to get away, but Maror pushed her down to the ground, pressing his blaster against her stomach.
Belly wound. Very slow and painful way to die. It's what you deserve. You've ruined everything. Let her go.
Maror looked up, his already pale face going one shade lighter. Riker was standing about 10 feet higher on the slope. He held a phaser aimed squarely at Maror.
No, Federation man, you put your phaser down or I'll kill her. I swear. All right, just don't hurt her. Let her go, and I'll take her place.
Riker tossed his phaser to one side. At that moment, Deanna jabbed a sharp stone into Maror's hand, drawing blood. He let out a howl. It was all the distraction Riker needed. He leaped and plowed into Maror, pushing Deanna clear. The two men went down, rolling and shoving, each of them trying to get leverage. With a quick twist of his hip, Riker slammed Maror up against a tree with a bone-jarring jolt. Maror lost his grip on the blaster, and Riker made a grab for it. Maror's foot lashed out, kicking the blaster away into the underbrush. And then the Sindarine drove his foot up into Riker's face. Riker went down, rolling, tasting his blood welling up in his mouth. Maror came at him, pulling a knife from his sleeve. Riker, on his feet, barely avoided the slashing attack. The blade sank into the tree trunk. Riker knocked Maror back, and the Sindarine raider came up with the blaster that had been knocked into the brush. Riker dove for cover as the blaster bolt sizzled over his head. Maror dodged to the right to try to get a clear shot at Riker. And Riker saw where Maror was heading.
Wait, stop. Don't go there, don't move. Why not, Federation man? Because this will give me the best angle to turn you into a sack of boneless skin.
He leaped to his right, and landing with an odd, squishing noise, aimed his blaster directly at Riker. Riker waved his hands wildly.
Move, before it's too late. Too late? The one it's too late for is...
That was when Maror realized he was getting shorter. He looked down. He was standing squarely in one of the infamous Jalara jungle mud pits. He looked back up and finished the sentence with slow realization.
The one it's too late for is me. Hold on.
But Maror had been correct. It was too late. Barely 5 seconds later, before Riker could get to him, Maror had vanished beneath the surface of the mud pit without a trace. And insanely, Maror's final expression had been one of quiet triumph. Deanna insisted that she was all right and unhurt, so Riker contacted Sergeant Tang. The various members of the security crew had split up, the better to cover the vast distances of the jungle. Now Riker informed Tang that Deanna had been recovered. They were now heading toward the rendezvous point. It would take several days to get there, but Riker was well stocked with provisions, and no abnormal delays were anticipated. As they walked through the jungle, he was really able to appreciate, for the first time, just how beautiful it was. The air was warm, even steamy, and filled with a scented mist. He turned and looked to Deanna, who had been extremely silent for the past half hour. There in the midst of the warm jungle, she was shivering. Her teeth were chattering. Immediately, he knew what was happening. All during the time she'd been in danger, she had managed to keep everything bottled up. But now that she was safe, all that stress was catching up with her. He went to her and put his arms around her.
It's okay. Let it out, Deanna, that's all right.
She trembled more violently, staring not at Riker but straight ahead. He stroked her face, making soft, comforting noises, letting her know that it was okay to be frightened, reminding her that she wasn't alone, telling her that he understood. And slowly, ever so slowly, the trembling diminished and eventually stopped. Then she looked up at Riker, He smiled down at her and wondered if she was prepared to move on. Deanna, are you ready? Yes, I am. I finally am. She reached up, wrapped her hand around the back of his head, and drew his face to hers. The kiss was very long and very sweet, and filled with promise. Deanna, this isn't right. This isn't the time. You aren't thinking straight. You've been through a lot. She held his face in her hands, with her lips mere inches from his. Let me put this to you in a way that I know you'll understand. Shut up and kiss me, Riker. Moments later, all the perfectly logical reasons why this was wrong went out of Riker's mind. Instead, all there was her. The moistness of the jungle combined with the sweat. The rustling of trees mixed with the rustling of their clothes. And this time, when their nude bodies pressed against each other, there was no intellectualizing, no deep discussion that required anything beyond soft, whispered words, punctuated by occasional gasps. They became each other, filling each other's needs, melding their bodies into one as seamlessly as they had their souls. And somewhere deep within Riker's mind, merged with his spirit, a word echoed. A word that he had never heard before. A word filled with mystery and promise and the future. And the word was Imzadi. They lay next to each other. He had his hand against his shoulder. He picked out a length of vine that had become tangled. He was about to toss it aside, but she took it from him. No, I want to keep that as a souvenir. You know, Will, when I'm with you, all my training, my over-intellectualizing, as you put it, just vanishes. I've never felt this way about anyone, and I finally decided to give in to it. I feel the same way. There are no words to... Wait, actually, there was a word. You thought it at me. Imzi, or something? She propped herself up on one elbow and faced him fully. Imzadi. That's it. What does that mean? Well, it has several meanings. The surface level is simply beloved or dear one. But when used with certain people under certain circumstances, it has a further nuance. It means the first. The first. Yes. No matter what happens from here on, we will always be true Imzadi. We will be forever each other's first. She looked up at him with those large, dark eyes, and he felt like a total creep. You mean you've never had sex with any other man before? That's right. Look, Deanna, I don't know if I said or did anything to give you the impression otherwise, but you're not my first. I've had sex with women before you. Oh, you've had other women. Physically, I know that. To be Imzadi is to go far deeper than that. Don't you understand, Will? Other women may have had your body, but I'm the first who's ever touched your soul. And he realized, with a dim astonishment, that she was absolutely right. He smiled. Imzadi. And she returned the smile and answered him, I understand. Several days of travel had passed, a day or two longer than such a trip through the jungle would have taken ordinarily. But Deanna and Will kept stopping along the way for exercise. Now, only a few hours out from the rendezvous point, Riker was staring at a piece of paper, an unusual enough material in and of itself, but the Starfleet security belt contained materials for every occasion. The paper was covered with Riker's scribblings, and he looked at it in embarrassment. He was about to toss it away when Deanna, who had returned from her morning ablutions faster than anticipated, snatched it away. She started to read it.
Deanna, I wasn't going to show it to you until it was finished. It's lousy. Shh.
She was reading it carefully, every word. And then her voice sounded in his head. "This is beautiful, Imzadi." He thought cast back to her. "Do you really like it?" For reply, she read it out loud.
I hold you close to me. Feel the breath of you and the wonder of you, and remember a time without you, but only as one would remember a bleak and distant nightmare. The future holds such promise, and just as I cannot imagine how I survived the past without you, I cannot imagine a future without you.
Oh, Deanna, it's terrible.
It's beautiful, and I'm keeping it right here.
She folded it up and tucked it in her bodice. They traveled the rest of the way, fingers intertwined, releasing only when they were in sight of the rendezvous point in their waiting lift back to the city. Riker had heard nothing from Deanna since returning her home, so he had gone to the Troi mansion to see her and anticipated a warm welcome. Deanna Troi herself answered the door. She forced a smile but did not step aside to allow him admission.
Lieutenant, I have a moral obligation to thank you. You rescued my daughter. I will always be forever in your debt. However, your subsequent actions with my daughter were completely out of line. You took advantage of a very incendiary situation.
Riker was doing everything he could not to lose his temper.
What happened between Deanna and myself, Mrs. Troi, was entirely our business. I want to see Deanna.
And do what, Lieutenant? Try to further dilute her sense of purpose? Lieutenant, Deanna isn't like other women you've known. She has obligations here on Betazed. Where's the future for the two of you? Are you going to give up your career to remain here, trade in your space legs for walking shoes? And how long before you start blaming Deanna for the decisions you make?
Then, in the hallway behind Waxana, he spotted Deanna. She was standing near the bottom of the stairway, a haunted look on her face. She's right, Will. Sooner or later, you're going to leave. Your place is out there. Mine's here. It's never going to get any better for us than it was in the jungle. Let it end on a high note, Will, not in the downward spiral of a relationship gone wrong. And then she ran from him, up the stairs and out of sight. Riker turned and looked at Waxana.
I'm sorry, Lieutenant. Believe it or not, I really am. Good day.
The door closed in his face. The scotch burned as it went down Riker's throat. He had gotten the hard alcohol from Sergeant Tang, who had seen the young officer's bleak mood off of the bottle unaware. Riker had taken it to his quarters and had been drinking it steadily ever since. What in hell had he been thinking of anyway? Getting involved with a local girl that way? That kind of thing never led to anything but trouble. And not just involved, no. He'd actually had to go and get feelings for her. The alcohol was nicely fuzzing his brain, though. He was starting to have trouble remembering who he'd had feelings for, and what precisely those feelings had been. The door chimed. Riker, confused, tapped his communicator.
Riker here. Riker here, can you hear me?
Will, I want to see you.
Riker spoke into his communicator.
Wendy? Sure. Come on over.
Wendy walked in. Riker blinked in surprise.
Wow. That was fast.
I heard you were upset about something, Will.
Nonsense. Do I sound upset?
No, actually, you sound drunk.
He sat on the edge of the bed and stared off into space for a moment. Wendy sat next to him, waiting for him to say something.
You know, Wendy, you get in your head this picture of the way that you think things are going to go, and they never match up. Nothing ever turns out the way you think it's going to. This lousy little planet, a whole galaxy of opportunity, and she's got her head buried in the sands of Betazed, afraid to think about it.
I don't know who you're talking about, Will, but it's sure not me. I want my freedom. Another year or two here, and then I'm gone. Diplomatic corps, or maybe I'll just hitch, do odd jobs. I don't want anything too complicated in life. Nice and simple, hit and run. That's my motto.
There was a pleasant buzz in Riker's head as he stared at the daughter of the Federation ambassador.
Has anyone told you how terrific you look?
Not for a long time.
And has anyone done anything about how terrific you look?
Not for an even longer time.
He kissed her, feeling giddy. She was warm and supple against him, undemanding, yielding, wanting nothing more from him than he was capable of giving. He broke from her a moment.
What do you think of art?
Boring.
Thank God.
And they sank down onto the bed. It was some time later when a startled gasp awakened Riker. He sat up in confusion and saw Deanna standing in the doorway.
My apologies, Lieutenant. I seem to have come at a bad time. Perhaps if I'd called ahead, you might have been able to fit me into your schedule.
The noise awakened Wendy, who sat up next to Riker. She saw Deanna, blinked in mild chagrin, and pulled the blanket around herself to cover her nudity. When Riker spoke, his voice sounded thick and slow to himself, and his head was pounding.
Deanna, this isn't what it seems. Okay, it is what it seems, but you said you didn't want to see me anymore. That we were finished, and
it had been less than 24 hours since you'd had female companionship, so naturally you got over me. In fact, not only did you get over me, you practically vaulted over me.
She spun and walked away. By this time, Riker had pulled on his uniform. He caught up with her halfway down the hallway and spun her around.
Deanna, you said...
I know what I said. And would you like to know what I said afterward to my mother? That I was wrong to toss you away. That it was time for me to find my own path, and that I wanted that path to be with you. But I foolishly assumed that you wanted me as well. I crawled out on a limb for you, and you chopped it off behind me.
It wasn't like that, Deanna. I wasn't thinking straight, and Wendy showed up, and
it was an opportunity, Will? And it really didn't mean anything?
That's right.
And how do I know, Will, that our time together didn't fall into the same category?
It didn't. You know it didn't.
Will, I thought we had something special, physical and spiritual. But for me, one hinges on the other. For you, it doesn't. And I don't think that's ever going to change for you. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But I can't base my life on maybes.
For a moment, he bristled.
You sound so damned holier than thou. Maybe you'll be the one who changes. Maybe you'll discover that the physical side can have its own rewards, now that you've allowed yourself to experience it. Perhaps. But there's one thing of which I'm reasonably sure at this point, Will, that you're not going to be there to find out. I'm sorry. I just don't think there's a future for us.
She walked away from him, and he said nothing to stop her from going. Then he turned. There was Sergeant Tang leaning against a wall.
You were right to let her go, sir. Mark me. There's a twinkling star for every broken heart that a Starfleet man leaves. Shut up, Tang. Shutting up, sir. All part of the service.
Riker's next assignment was finally out of dry dock. It was speeding towards Betazed on its way to pick up its new first officer, Lieutenant William Riker. Riker knew the ship was on the way. He had taken care of everything, made all the final preparations. Almost. He found himself in the art museum, staring at one particular painting. The one with the large goopy swirls. He looked at it for quite some time. Then slowly, he realized it bore a striking resemblance to stars swimming in sort of a galactic whirlpool. Perhaps it was something like the way the universe looked at the very beginning. Void and miasmic and filled with promise and possibilities. He sensed her standing next to him, but he couldn't turn to face her.
You're leaving, Imzadi. I wish you safe voyage. And I wish you could come with me. For a time, Will, I was ready to change my universe for you. But now I don't think either of us is ready for that.
He tried to say that she was wrong, but he couldn't. So instead he tried to find some way to say goodbye, but he couldn't do that either. He turned to her.
Deanna,
But she was gone. He took a step in the direction he was sure she had headed, then stopped. He knew this was the way she wanted it. And somehow, somewhere along the way, what she wanted had become more important to him than what he wanted. 10 years had passed. The Enterprise, newly commanded by Captain jean-luc was in orbit around Farpoint Station. Captain Troi, stardate 42372.5. Of the 24 hours Q allotted us to prove ourselves, 11 have now passed without incident. And yet, I cannot forget Q's prediction that we will face here some critical test of human worth. There had been a number of strange goings-on. Picard had just finished filling in his new second-in-command, Commander William Riker. Now Picard and Riker were heading toward the bridge turbolift on their way to meet with Farpoint's head, Roppler Zorn. As the turbolift door opened, Picard motioned to the person stepping out. Over here, Counselor. Number 1. I've asked the ship's counselor to join us in this meeting. Counselor, may I introduce our new first officer, Commander William Riker? Mr. Riker, our ship's counselor, Deanna Troi. It had been a decade since their time together on Betazed, but the old feelings flooded over him with the same sting as if the wound were still fresh. Deanna, for her part, looked utterly serene. Her voice sounded in his head. Do you remember what I taught you, Imzadi? Can you still sense my thoughts? But out loud, she was almost nonchalant.
A pleasure, Commander.
Likewise, Counselor.
From Riker's flustered expression, Picard now knew that something was definitely going on.
Have the two of you met before?
We have, sir.
Excellent. I consider it important that my key officers know each other's abilities.
Riker wasn't sure, but he thought he could hear Troy's silent laughter echoing in his brain.
We do, sir. We do.
They stepped into the turbolift, and his thoughts were whirling. They had parted with so much unsaid. Did she know he cared? Had she been nursing a grudge all these years, not understanding how? And then there was her voice again, in his mind, carrying her thoughts to him like a dove finding its home. I, too, would never say goodbye, Imzadi. Relief flooded over him. He should have known that she would understand, and that there was indeed going to be a basis on which to build a relationship. He wasn't sure where that relationship was going to go from there, or what its ultimate fate would be. But at least whatever happened in the future, they would be facing it together. It took them some time to work it out. With all the complications that would come from being lovers again, they had decided simply not to rush things. A shipboard relationship could turn sour, disastrous. Neither of them was willing to risk everything to stoke the embers of their relationship. They decided to give things time. They did not, however, give their relationship much of anything else. Laws of inertia govern, among most other things, human interaction. As their years together on the Enterprise rolled past, their relationship, since it was at rest, tended to stay at rest. The only force that could have acted on them to change it would have been the idea that they might not be able to alter the course of things anytime they felt like it. Then again, why should they have considered that possibility? After all, they thought they had all the time in the universe. And then came the peace conference with the Sindarine. It was night. Riker lay on his back, staring up into the darkness of his quarters, reflecting on how the day had gone. The Sindarine delegation had been brought aboard. A tall, elegant-looking woman named Nitsi, and her aide, Asa, who was smaller, nastier-looking, and seemed to keep staring at Deanna from the corner of his eye. There had been a dinner reception with a level of quiet tension, but everyone had gotten through it without incident. His hands were interlaced behind his head, the pillow soft under him. He had been that way for over an hour as sleep refused to come. Sorting out his feelings for Deanna was rapidly becoming something of a royal pain. Perhaps they'd been kidding themselves. Here he was, someone accustomed to command situations, and she was someone who was always in touch with her feelings. So naturally, they thought they could control their feelings and dictate their relationship, turn their emotions on and off like an old-style light switch. But how realistic was that? He pictured her lying in her quarters, wrapped in Dan's arms. And then, something made him sit bolt upright in bed. Someone was there, hiding in the corner, lurking in the darkness. He started to call out for the lights when a hand clamped over his mouth and shoved him back down onto the bed. Riker struggled fiercely, shoving at the arm that held him down. He reached upward, grabbing at his assailant's face, feeling a bristling beard and skin that was like parchment. And then a voice said,
Lights!
Riker froze, because the voice sounded insanely familiar. The lights came up on command, and now Riker could make out the features of the intruder. The hair and beard were thick and gray. The skin was wrinkled and time-worn, and the eyes burned fiercely with determination, and the face was unmistakable. He was looking up at himself, except he was decades older.
Shut up. We haven't much time. They may be here to try and stop me at any moment, so lie still, listen to me, and be prepared to do exactly what I tell you. Deanna's life hangs on what you do next.
Commander Riker stopped struggling, slowly realizing that he was not dreaming.
I'm going to let go of your mouth now. So help me, if you shout or try to get attention, I'll knock you cold and take care of this myself. And if I have to do that and get nailed because I'm easily spotted, then you will quite literally have no one but yourself to blame for the rest of your life.
Commander Riker nodded his understanding, and the Admiral slowly raised his hand. The commander was stunned.
Who are you? The Easter Bunny. Who in the hell do you think I am? Get dressed. Move. Move!
The commander did as instructed, rolling off the bed and pulling on his uniform.
You're from the future, aren't you?
Smart boy. Now, listen. Deanna's life is in mortal danger. 15 minutes from now, she's going to die. Beverly Crusher won't be able to find a reason for it, but there is a reason. She's been poisoned. Beverly won't be able to detect it because it's a poison that won't even be invented for another 30 years. But I've got the antidote for it right here in this vial. You've got to get to her quarters and get her to drink it.
This is insane. You seem to be from the future, but how do I know? You could be an imposter or...
Oh, really? This poem bring back memories? The future holds such promise, and just as I cannot imagine how I survived the past without you.
Riker stared at his future version in shock. And now full understanding came to him.
She died. In your past, my future, she died. And you've come back somehow to try and prevent it. You're tampering with time. And the people you're worried about trying to stop you, maybe scientists or, my God, Starfleet personnel trying to stop you from breaking one of our most important laws.
She wasn't supposed to die, I'm certain of it. It was wrong. Wrong for her, me, everyone. I'm here to prevent that wrong.
Unless someone stops you, which means that somebody else isn't as certain as you.
Admiral Riker grabbed Will Riker by his uniform front. Despite his age, his strength was almost undiminished and fueled by anger.
Damn you, you sanctimonious clod! You want certainty? Here's your certainty. Deanna is going to die. She's going to writhe on the floor and beg you to do something. And all you're going to do is watch her die. And it's not going to be until that moment that you realize she's the better part of you.
There was tremendous conflict in Commander Will Riker's eyes.
It's wrong. It's wrong to tamper with the past. I can't believe there's any circumstance under which I'd knowingly...
You think you can judge me? Remember what we wrote about imagining a future without her? Well, I'm the future without her, buddy boy, and I can tell you right now that it's not something you're going to relish. Her life will end, Riker. You can save it. Here's the vial. You have the power. You're her only hope in hell, and if you don't save her, then hell is where you're going to be. 40 years of hell. Of might-have-beens and what-ifs. For me, there was just the frustration of feeling that I should have done something. But I didn't know what. For you, it's going to be the knowledge that you could have done something but didn't. How much worse for you, Commander? When you call out with your mind, Imzadi, and no one answers. No part of your soul that acknowledges that the word has any meaning to anyone else. What will happen to you then? God damn you, Riker! When your heart's been cut out, how's it going to feel knowing that you're the one who wielded the knife?
Will ripped away from him, his face ashen, his heart pounding.
Deanna!
He charged from his quarters. Riker ran down the hallway and skidded to a halt outside Deanna's quarters. He barged in. Deanna was seated on the bed arguing with her old friend, Dan, the representative from the Lust delegation. When she saw Riker, she rose to her feet, her entire face a question. Riker thrust the vial towards Deanna.
Drink this, quickly.
Dan came off the bed and stood between them.
Are you crazy? Get out of here!
Deanna, you have to drink it. Your life depends on it.
My life? Dan blocked Riker, and Will grabbed him by the shoulders and tried to push him to one side. Dan didn't budge. He was a head shorter and considerably slimmer than Riker, but he held his ground. Riker felt like time was slowing to a crawl for him as he twisted at Dan's grasp and flipped the vial onto the bed. Deanna picked it up, confused. Dan spun towards the bed.
Give me that!
With his free hand, he lunged for the vial. Riker spun him around and threw Dan across the room. He crashed into the furniture.
Deanna, if you ever trusted me, if you ever loved me, drink it.
Deanna needed no further urging. She pulled at the stopper. It was stuck. With an animalistic roar, Dan sprang towards Deanna. Riker met his charge, and the two of them went down. Riker pounded furiously on Dan's head. It didn't slow him down. Deanna worked desperately at the stopper, kneading it with her fingers. It worked its way upwards. Dan began to transform, his body covered with thick brown hair, his hands shaping into claws. Riker recognized the species immediately. It was a camelot. Shapeshifters. Incredibly powerful, incredibly dangerous. Deanna started to feel a burning deep inside her. At that moment, the stopper popped open. Dan made one final desperate lunge, but Riker held him back as Deanna drained the contents of the vial in one gulp. The cameloid howled in fury, trying to bat Riker off his back.
You idiot! Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you?
He shoved Riker off and started towards Deanna, hands outstretched. A phaser blast from behind sent the cameloid to his knees. Worf stood in the doorway and fired again. The cameloid wailed in frustration and then fell unconscious. While Worf calmly slung the cameloid over his shoulder, Riker went over to Deanna.
Are you all right? I felt something. Some sort of burning in my chest, but now it's gone. Will, what's happened? Get dressed. I'll tell the captain that he should meet us at my cabin. You'll understand it all then. All right. Oh, Commander. Thank you for saving my life. All part of the service, ma'am.
Admiral Will Riker was waiting in young Commander Riker's quarters. Soon he would know the outcome of his younger self's rescue mission, and he thought about the bizarre circumstances that had brought him to this place and this point in time. He had finished his business on Betazed, and as planned, it had been the Enterprise, commanded by Commodore Data, that had picked him up for his return trip to Starbase 86. It had been on that trip that Data had given him a remarkable piece of news. The scientists on the Forever World had discovered an alternative timeline extending from a focal point in time. The focal point, insanely enough, was Counselor Deanna Troi. In the reality that Admiral Riker knew, Deanna had died on the eve of the Sindarine Peace Conference. But in another reality, Deanna Troi had lived. Data had told him this to try and provide some consolation to the grief that Riker had carried with him for so long. In a parallel time stream, Data had explained, Deanna Troi had not died. He had assumed that Riker would draw some measure of peace from that. Riker had not. Instead, he had drawn a desperate plan. The first step had been to order a new autopsy for the body of Deanna. The new equipment, advanced by 4 decades, had revealed traces of the poison that Dr. Beverly Crusher had been unable to detect. The fact that Deanna had been killed by a poison that was out of its proper time was more than enough to convince Riker that something was wrong. He was certain that someone had gone back in time and killed Deanna. The killer had known that the advanced poison would escape the detection technology available to Beverly Crusher. And Riker resolved to go back himself, through the Guardian of Forever, and set matters to right. Data had disagreed with the plan. Starfleet regulations were quite specific, and Data could not possibly countenance a plan that would cause a shift in the time stream, even if, as Riker was convinced, it would cause time to be corrected. Data had tried to head him off and stop him. He had been too late, arriving just moments before Riker had overcome resistance from the scientist and leaped into the Guardian. Riker knew that Data wouldn't let matters stand. As long as Data was on the planet's surface, he was protected from whatever changes Riker might cause. So it was only a matter of time before Data sent someone back, or perhaps went back himself, to try and head Riker off. At that moment, the Admiral looked up as the doors to the cabin hissed open. In walked Picard, along with Commander Riker and one other crew member. The Admiral inhaled sharply.
Deanna. Will?
He approached her, reaching out to her. He brought his hands up to her face, hovered over it for an instant as if afraid to touch her. But then he did. He put his shaking hands to her face. His chest began to heave with pent-up emotion, and the old man started to sob. He no longer cared where he was or who was watching. The ethics of his actions did not weigh on him. All that mattered was that she was there, and she was alive and in his arms, and he thought,
Oh, God. Imzadi. I'm whole again. I never knew. I never knew what I had until you were gone.
With an effort, he composed himself and addressed his younger self.
Did you encounter any problems, Commander Riker?
A slight one. A cameloid had apparently accosted Dan of the Lust delegation and taken his place. Dan was found unconscious in his cabin a few minutes ago.
A cameloid, eh? Large? Brown hair and furry? Unless I miss my guess, he's an officer named Blair. If they anticipated my trying to save her, the best way to keep an eye on her was to impersonate someone close to her.
In that case, Admiral, you were taking a chance coming to me. I could have been one of them.
I know. That's why I mentioned the poetry to you, to watch your reaction. It wasn't just to convince you that I'm you. It was also to convince me that you're me.
Picard stepped forward.
I hate to break this up, but I, who am unquestionably me, would be most grateful if either of you cared to tell me what in hell is going on. Watch your tone with me, Captain. I have seniority and I outrank you.
Quickly, the Admiral outlined the situation for Picard. The Captain took it all in.
All right, Admiral. But you left things out. How did you come here? In your reality, what happened as a consequence of Deanna's death? You have to tell us so that we can be prepared.
The Admiral looked at him for a long, difficult moment.
I can't tell you, Captain. You have to know how difficult this was for me, what a big chance I've taken. If I talk about any events beyond my immediate goal of saving Deanna, then I run the risk of saying the wrong thing. What if I mention that you're alive in my time? Then you can get overconfident and sloppy, and die, and screw things up. Or if I mention that 40 years from now, you're dead. Then every time you run into any sort of danger between now and then, you'll be wondering, is this it? Is this what results in my death? I'm sorry, Jean-Luc. Time is very malleable, and I'm just not going to mold the clay any further. All right, Admiral. I understand your position, and now you understand mine. You will stay confined to these quarters. I don't need a random time element gallivanting around my ship. Very well, Captain. I hope you can learn to live with your mistake. And you, Commander Riker?
He slapped his younger self on the chest.
You're an idiot. You're choosing the tidy, easy path with Deanna instead of the more difficult, but ultimately more rewarding path. You aren't even smart enough to know when you have a good thing.
The Admiral made a noise of utter disgust and dropped down into a chair. Picard, Will, and Deanna Troi slowly backed out of the quarters, leaving the sullen Admiral to himself. In the 10 Forward lounge, Picard was discussing the situation with Guinan. The 10 Forward hostess had shown sensitivity to alterations in the space-time continuum before. Data walked into 10 Forward and looked around thoughtfully. Picard caught his attention and gestured for him to come over. Data took a place next to the captain and politely nodded to Guinan.
A question, Captain. Why are Lieutenant Worf and 3 other security guards stationed around Counselor Troi's quarters? I will tell you, Data, and I will inform Commander Riker that you have been brought into our little circle of secrecy. But it is to go no further. Now, the official reason is that an unknown assailant, presently in the brig, made an attempt on the Counselor's life. That much is, in fact, true. However, it's quite a bit more involved than that.
Data, however, knew precisely how involved it was. For this Data, who tilted his head thoughtfully and listened to the captain's description of his situation, already knew not only what had happened, but more. This Data had stepped through the Guardian of Forever. This Data had waylaid his younger version, who, of course, looked identical, and then deactivated him and left him in his cabin. This Data, no matter how difficult it was going to be for him on a personal level, had resolved that he had only one choice when it came to setting the time stream right. He was going to have to see to it personally that Counselor Deanna Troi died. By the following morning, there had been one change of security guards since the captain had ordered a watch put on Deanna Troi. Worf, however, had remained the entire time. As Riker approached, Worf turned to him with a fierce, protective scowl.
No one has seen or spoken to Counselor Troi, except for a carefully supervised visit by Dr. Crusher.
Excellent, Mr. Worf. Riker to Counselor Troi. Are you awake, Deanna?
Yes, Commander. Awake and ready to go.
Moments later, Deanna, Worf, Riker, and the guards were heading down the hallway. They attracted curious glances as others walked past them. Deanna leaned over to Riker.
Do I really require an entire entourage?
Just until we get to the conference room.
Once you're there, you'll be safe, and Worf and the others can return to their duties.
In the quarters of Commander Riker, Admiral William Riker crouched in a corner and pulled at the heel of his boot. He kept twisting it until it came clean off. Then he emptied its contents into his palm. Before leaving the Admiral sequestered in the cabin, Commander Riker had removed several weapons from his older self, but there was no way he could have noticed the ultra-miniature phaser that the Admiral had hidden in his boot heel. The Admiral prayed he had done the right thing holding back information. He knew his job wasn't finished, because if Deanna were out of danger, then the Guardian would have pulled him back to his own time. But that hadn't happened, which meant Deanna still wasn't in the clear. He had to get out. He went to the far wall. He knew that the officer in the adjoining cabin had already gone off to his morning duties, so this was definitely the preferred exit route. He held the phaser close to the wall, set it for a low and quiet setting, and fired. A pencil-thin beam of light emerged from the miniature phaser. The ship's security system did not recognize the futuristic phaser. Instead, it identified the weapon as the closest analog, namely a handheld arc welder. This was hardly a weapon, and therefore no security alert was required. Riker continued his work undisturbed. The two security guards outside Commander Riker's quarters took no notice when the door to the adjoining quarters hissed open. As a result, they never had a chance to react before the phaser beam, now set to stun, cut loose from the miniature weapon in the hand of Admiral Riker. Instantly, they both fell to the ground, unconscious. Admiral Riker grabbed them each by one wrist, backed up, and dragged them into the cabin from which he'd just exited. Inside the cabin, there was a large hole that Riker had cut through with the phaser. He left them lying on the floor. When the Admiral re-emerged from the cabin, he was wearing the uniform of one of the guards. Although there was nothing he could do about his obvious resemblance to the Enterprise's second-in-command, at least he could make himself a bit less noticeable as he moved through the corridors. As he tried to determine his next move, he muttered to himself, "All right, Data, if you are here, where would you be? What would you be up to? Would you really be so cold-hearted as to kill Deanna? And if so, how would you go about it?" At the conference room, the Sindarine ambassadors Nitsi and Asa finally entered. Nitsi bowed slightly to the assemblage. "Our apologies. We were unaware that the switch had been made to this conference room." Asa was staring at Deanna Troi with a most peculiar expression on his face. And Deanna started to feel the first tickle to her mind of something. Something that she was starting to place. The vague feeling that she had encountered once before, when she had been captive, years ago, of a Sindarine raider. In the corridor, Admiral Riker suddenly skidded to a halt. Of course, that's what he'd do. He turned and barreled down the corridor. Minutes later, he was entering Data's quarters. Riker moaned softly. Data was lying unmoving on the bed. It was clear he'd been shut off and tossed there like a sack of wheat. To make matters worse, his head was gone. Riker allotted 60 seconds to locate the head before he went after the future Data himself. It would have been nice to have the strength of the present Data as backup, but he would make do if he had to. He always had in the past, or future, or whatever. The door to the conference room hissed open, and Data stepped in. Picard looked up as the android approached him.
"A private matter, Captain, for Counselor Troi."
Data proceeded to move over to the counselor and Riker.
"I have some rather distressing news. Admiral Riker, your future self, Commander, seems to have suffered some sort of massive heart attack. Dr. Crusher says he's barely stabilized, and he's calling for you, Counselor. I don't feel him in that sort of distress. He's barely conscious, Counselor. Perhaps that affects your empathic abilities. I took the liberty of coming in person, Commander Riker, rather than using communicators, in the event that unauthorized individuals are somehow tapping into our comm systems.
Good thinking, Mr. Data.
Will, I'd better go to him.
I'll go too.
Are you certain you wish to do that, Commander? Watching yourself die, I'd think it would be difficult for you. He's right, Will. Please. I don't want to put you through that. Data's with me. I'll be fine. Honestly, if you ask me, I think you're being overly concerned. The danger is probably over.
Data nodded in agreement. With 3 seconds to spare in his self-imposed countdown, Admiral Riker found Data's head. It had been wrapped carefully in a sheet and shoved into the back of the closet. He activated it as soon as he pulled it from the cloth. Data blinked and looked around, then he stared up into the face of his liberator.
I assume you are not the person who put me into this predicament. You appear to be Commander Riker, but considerably aged.
Come on, Data. We're going. Can you operate your body from here?
With a cybernetic impulse from Data's positronic brain, his body lurched off the bed like something from an old horror film.
Sir, be careful to face me forward so that I can see where I am going.
Riker bolted into the corridor and started down the hallway, Data's head tucked under one arm.
Would you care to apprise me, sir, of what is occurring?
Riker proceeded to lie through his teeth.
I am an older version of your Commander Riker, as you must have surmised. But I'm from another dimension. I'm pursuing Lore, your twin, who killed Deanna in my dimension and now has come here to perform the same murderous act. His motives are a complete mystery to me.
Riker knew if he told Data the truth, or even part of it, he might have a bigger problem than when he started. If this Data decided that the future Data's mission was a sound one, then Riker might very well have 2 androids trying to kill Deanna. Data accepted the lie without question. The Admiral realized it made as much sense, if not more sense, than the truth. Commander Will Riker sat down again as Data and Troi walked out of the conference room. He turned to Picard. My future self is very ill. Data says he's calling for Deanna. She's going to him. Picard studied Riker to make sure that his second-in-command was dealing with this news, but Riker's face was inscrutable. In fact, he seemed lost in thought. Deanna Troi looked worriedly at Data as he stepped to one side when they emerged from the conference room. He gestured for her to go first. They started down the hallway. Data studied her long neck, trying to decide what would be the most painless method of disposing of her. For some reason, now that the moment would shortly be at hand, he felt reluctant, but his duty was clear. In the conference room, Riker suddenly jumped as if someone had jammed a rod into his back. Picard looked at him in surprise.
Captain, Data said he's calling for her.
I know, number one, you told me that...
You don't understand, Captain. That's exactly what Data said. He's calling. He's, not he is. And he said it several times. He used contractions.
But Data doesn't use...
Immediately, both officers were on their feet, but Riker was nearer the exit. The ambassadors were babbling in utter confusion as Riker bolted out the door. He saw them, just turning the corner of the corridor. As if from a separation of years, he shouted after them.
Deanna! It's a trap!
Deanna spun around as Riker's words and his mind reached out to her and warned her. Data, aware that he had been found out, drew back his fist, and Deanna saw it just as she turned. He stepped forward and drove his fist straight toward her face. With a cry of alarm, Deanna dropped back. Data's fist whistled barely inches from her face and smashed into a wall, going in with such force that it penetrated up to his elbow. Picard came from nowhere, hurtling through the air and grabbing Data from behind. Data lifted Picard completely off his feet and was about to hurl him when Commander Riker plowed into the android, tackling him around the legs. It knocked the android off balance, and he lost his grip on Picard, who tumbled down on top of him. The ambassadors who had come running from the conference room were all shouting at once. Data was turning his attention to Deanna. Riker, indomitable, was grabbing at Data's leg, trying to slow him down. Picard, using the wall for support, was pulling himself to his feet. Everywhere there was confusion, chaos, raw emotions running rampant. And that was when Deanna pointed at the Sindarine delegation.
They've been deceiving us.
Time froze. Then, with amazing calm, Nietzsche spoke.
This is a lie.
No, it's not a lie.
Asa looked to Nietzsche.
Shut her up. Make her shut up.
But Deanna continued.
I sense that you want Data to succeed. You did not come here in good faith. I sense duplicity, lies, cheats, anything to stall for time for the Sindarine. You hope to use these peace talks as stalling tactics to forestall your empire's collapse. And once you've received the Federation's help, you'll resume your thieving, warlike ways.
This is madness.
But Deanna ignored Nietzsche's protests and instead whirled toward Asa.
And you especially wanted me dead. You'd do anything to see me dead. You tried, didn't you? You tried to kill me. Put something in my drink at the reception. I sense your emotions. Homicidal, murderous. It took me time to punch through the Sindarine resistance. And you tried to get rid of me before I could.
The air around them seemed to be shifting, coming to life somehow. There was a crackling of energy that seemed to come from nowhere. Asa howled.
You empathic bitch, you've ruined everything.
From his sleeve, Asa produced a small phaser, smaller than almost anyone had seen. He had a clear shot at Deanna. He wasn't going to miss. And suddenly, arcing through the air over Deanna's head, was a tumbling golden object. It struck Asa squarely in the chest, knocking him backward. The phaser shot went wide. The golden object skittered across the floor and rolled up to Deanna's feet. She looked down in astonishment at Data's face.
I suggest, Counselor, that you duck.
Deanna stood there, looking down in confusion. A second later, Data's body slammed into her from behind, knocking her to the floor next to Data's profusely apologizing head. His apologies were drowned out by the phaser beam that crackled over them. It enveloped Asa, staggering him, and he screeched in protest. Admiral William T. Riker advanced on him, slowly, inexorably, the power blasting from his phaser.
You're from my time, aren't you? That's the only place you could have gotten that weapon. You're from the time stream that had been and will be again. The time stream in which the Sindarine's duplicity was revealed by Deanna, and their peace initiative turned down. It was the downfall of your race. So you decided to come back and change your race's history to your liking. Kill the woman who blew the whistle on them. And in one reality, you got away with it. But not in my reality, you murderer. Not in mine, because you picked the wrong focal point.
Around them, the scream of the phaser merged with the howling of the air, and Asa was knocked completely off his feet. He sagged to the floor, unconscious and helpless. And then the air around them was roaring with far-off winds that seemed to call from another time and place, from an infinity of maybes. A coruscating, sparkling whirlpool of color and light. Asa started to dematerialize, his very molecules being drawn into the vortex around them. Commander Riker lost his grip on Data, who was also starting to fade. Deanna whirled to face the Admiral. He, too, was being drawn off. The color seemed to be fading from him. He reached out to her. "Deanna!" Heedless of the danger to herself, Deanna Troi stretched out her hand to the man who had crossed decades, remodeled the universe, all for her. Her hand passed right through him as if he were a ghost, the ghost of things yet to come. She cried out to him, "I'm sorry. I tried to touch you one last time." He smiled, his body disappearing like the Cheshire Cat's. His voice sounded distant. "Don't be sorry, Deanna. Maybe it won't be the last time. Besides, who really cares about all this physical touching? Not young Deanna Troi. It's the spiritual that's important. That's forever." And then, with a final roar and burst of wind that swept over everyone in the corridor, he was gone. Commander Riker entered Deanna's quarters, his hands behind his back. "Are you okay, Deanna?" She shut off the computer screen she was studying and folded her hands. "Why shouldn't I be okay?" "Well, you went through a lot yesterday." "We both did, but that was 24 hours ago. I bounced back quickly, given time." He walked slowly toward her. "I thought you'd be interested. The Cameloid disappeared about the same time as the others. Oh, and the Sindarine ambassador has been sent packing. The peace initiative has fallen apart, and the experts predict that it's just a matter of time now before the entire Sindarine civilization collapses, which is apparently what was supposed to happen the first time. And Data has his head together, so to speak. Apparently I, the Admiral that is, told Data that this other Data, the one trying to kill you, was actually Lore. And was it?" Riker paused and thought about it. "I don't know. I know Data believes it to be. I think he's far more satisfied with the notion that it was Lore than he would be with the concept that there would be a circumstance in which he'd try to murder you. Of course, we have no idea what influences will shape Data over the next 40 years. He might very well decide that, given the life of one woman versus the reality that he knows, the woman is dispensable, even if that woman is you. That's a hell of a thing for him to have to live with. So maybe it would be better if..." Deanna finished the thought for him. "If we kept it between ourselves? Consider it kept. So, did you come here to discuss everything except what you really want to discuss? Namely, us?" Riker let out a slow breath. She waited for him to speak. "Deanna, I don't know what's going to happen with us. I saw what I developed into without you. Can't say I liked it. But that was when you had been pulled from my life prematurely and completely. We could continue in the way that we are now, and as long as you're there to be friend, confidant, soulmate, things could work out well for both of us. I see what you're saying. Of course, on the other hand, if we become, or go back to, being lovers, things could work out even better for us. Or worse." He shook his head.
I feel so ridiculous. Do we really have to wait 40 years until we're ready to take a chance on the two of us? No, Will. We just have to wait until we're ready. It might take 40 years, or who knows? It might take 40 days. We have to wait and see. But at least we have a chance. It's up to us how we use it. That's true. Oh, by the way, Deanna, I made something for you. It's only an approximation, of course, based on my memories. Memories which were filled at the time with the sight of a particularly nubile young maid of honor and her lovely figure. He brought his hand from behind his back. In it was a thin, white gauze headband. That's like the one Chandra wore. Ah, so I did make it close enough so that it's recognizable. Deanna, if you wouldn't mind turning your head. She angled her head around and he looped it around and back, pulling her hair through. She stood and presented herself for inspection. How does it look? As beautiful as the woman wearing it. She felt her emotions turning to melted butter and she went to him. He enveloped her in his arms and their lips came together. And for a long moment, all the confusion and complexity of their lives fell away. And they were once again the young man and woman hungering for each other. The couple shyly learning about one another and exploring the things that each of them lacked and each of them provided. The new lovers in the jungle, intoxicated with their environment and each other. She was the woman whose life he'd saved, and he was the man whose life she had made. And they had all the time in the universe. Mary Mac watched in astonishment as 4 people emerged from the swirling vortex of the Guardian of Forever. Admiral Riker, Commodore Data, Lieutenant Blair, and one more form that tumbled forward, clearly unconscious. She went to them and rolled the body over to get a better look and confirm what she thought. This is Marlock, the scientist I told you about, the one who vanished. We just thought he left the planet. Riker prodded Marlock's unconscious body with his toe.
Oh, he left all right, but he left through the Guardian. Single-handedly, he created a universe in which his people's plan succeeded, and they grew once more into a strong, marauding race, but not anymore.
And then the Guardian spoke. All is as it was. Data turned to face the Guardian. You mean that Admiral Riker did indeed restore the timeline to its original form? That his actions were, in fact, correct? All is as it was. And now Blair stepped forward, his long fur swirling.
For crying out loud, if you knew that time had been tampered with in the first place and that the Admiral was doing the right thing, why in hell didn't you tell us that?
You did not ask. There was a long silence, except for the winds howling. Blair took a step closer to the Guardian.
We didn't ask.
Riker started to laugh.
We didn't ask? You mean everything we went through? All the difficult decisions we had to make? We didn't ask.
Data stood in quiet amazement.
It's true. We didn't. How very foolish of me. In my determination to uphold the Starfleet imperative of non-interference in time, I overlooked the obvious.
You forgot, Mr. Data. The first duty of Starfleet, which I thought about while I was with Captain Crusher. The duty that supersedes all imperatives and directives. That we must always
seek the truth.
Moments later, Mary Mack had enlisted Blair's aid in dragging the unconscious Marlock away. Data and Riker stood before the Guardian. I want you to understand, Admiral, that I am truly sorry for my actions.
That's all right, Data. On the face of it, what you did, or tried to do, was correct.
It's curious, Admiral. In my efforts to kill Deanna Troi, I made several clumsy mistakes. I did not intend to, but I did.
Perhaps you did intend to, Data. Perhaps you wanted to be stopped. One of the key things about being human is that you don't always know why you do the things you do. The important thing is that it's all worked out for the best.
Has it, Admiral? Consider, while we are on this planet, we are untouched by whatever changes might have been made by our reparations. When Marlock altered time, we, and our memories, simply altered with it. Now, however, we are at the center of the change. When we leave this world, there is no certainty as to what will happen to us. Our memories may shift to accommodate the new time stream, or we may retain our memories but be in a strange new environment. There is even a remote possibility that we may blink out of existence if we do not exist as entities in this time stream.
I don't think that's going to happen, Data. And you know why? Because I think that this thing, the Guardian, is God's window on the universe. And I don't think God would have let us in through his window if he didn't intend for us to live in his house.
That's very spiritual, Admiral.
I didn't used to be spiritual, but I had a good teacher. I don't know what else there is to say, Data, except...
Data put up a hand, momentarily silencing Riker, and paused to get the correct inflection of his next words.
Let's get the hell out of here.
Riker nodded.
I think that probably covers it.
Riker gazed up at the swirling skies, the vast colored streaks and miasma of temporal rifts that formed the heavens above the forever world. And he realized that in the sky's swirling and whirlpool shape, he saw a painting he'd seen a lifetime ago. There were reds and purples, and then in the midst of this vast mixture of cosmic existence, he saw an image. We're going to face a new and different universe, Admiral. Are you not at all afraid?
No, Data. I'm not afraid at all. I think it's going to work out just fine.
And he called out, as he had called out in hopelessness and despair, for year upon year of desolation. And the answer came. Whether it was from within him, or whether it came from somewhere out there in the galaxy, from someone who was the better part of all that he was, he couldn't be sure. But it was there just the same. Tears came to his eyes as he heard in his head the words that he'd waited half a lifetime to hear. Sweet and musical, in a voice filled with promise. Welcome home, Imzadi.
Imzadi was written and adapted for audio by Peter David and read by Jonathan Frakes. The recording engineer was Paul Fowley. Post-production and sound design by Gary Fink. Original music was composed by Richard Emmett, Sam McCallie, and Carl Schurtz. Theme music from the Star Trek television series was composed by Alexander Courage and Gene Roddenberry and used courtesy of Bruin Music. The associate producer was Linda Woolman. Imzadi was produced and directed by Susan Perrin. Also available from Simon & Schuster AudioWorks, Star Trek: The Next Generation, Q-In-Law by Peter David, read by Majel Barrett and John Delancey.